Okay, well, good morning, and thank you for allowing us to participate as a sponsor. We hope to see that this is a good event, bringing together publisher and manufacturer and evangelizing what digital print can do. We are a manufacturer of digital presses, so many of the manufacturers have our product. We have some samples outside. We want to sort of debunk some of the concerns about quality, so we're showing digital printing with inkjet on coated stocks and meeting offset quality, and there's samples of that out on the table outside when you go on your next break. So thank you and have a good session.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sherry Giamalo. I'm the Senior Advisor for Marketing for Canon Solutions America. I'm based out of Boca Raton, Florida, which is a little warmer and sunnier there. But it's a pleasure to be here in New York City with all of you. We've been members of the BMI for many, many years and supported the BMI conferences and groups, and have found it a very valuable group to be supporting. I will tell you that in this inaugural event here with Book Manufacturing Masters, what an outstanding venue to get the manufacturers, the book printers, as well as the publishers together. There are so many outstanding issues in working together to make things happen and make things happen efficiently and effectively. Canon Solutions America is a leader in inkjet and within the book market as well. So we are here to help you, support you, and make things happen in a lean manufacturing way. We have Alan Filson here representing Canon Solutions America. You'll hear just some of the workflows and efficiencies that can help you as publishers and help you as book manufacturers as well. So it's a pleasure, and thank you, BMI, Matt, for coming up with this ingenious idea of bringing all of us together. So thank you, and it's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you very much. So I hope everyone's refreshed, ready to get back at it. Next up, we're going to discuss more on standardization, and I'm going to turn it over to Brian O'Leary from BISG.
Thanks, Matt. It's good to be back. When we actually first conceived this panel, Matt thought it was a great idea and said, you should definitely run it. And I got a chance, there's no good deed goes unpunished. And I had a chance to preview it last week on an IBPA call, and Angela Boll was on it, and I said that we were actually thinking we should schedule it during the break because it's the only way we get everybody to stay. But I think we're going to do a little bit better than that. Today we have Alan Filson from Canon, as you heard a minute ago, but also Rich Letchinger from Worzalla. And what we've done is put together a set of questions that I'm going to ask. But it's really a conversation. We do have time in the course of this to answer questions as well, and we really encourage it. So I wanted to start, you guys are both in manufacturing, but in different parts of the business. Maybe starting with Rich, talk about the work that you do and what your company's all about.
Great, thanks. I'm Rich Letchinger. I have the responsibility for sales and marketing for Worzalla. We are a traditional offset printer based in God's country in central Wisconsin. It's a little colder than Boca right now. So, you know, we're in the end of the business that has Gutenberg and Ben Franklin as our subject matter experts. We're going to talk about standards today, and we're going to talk about how they apply to all of the technology that exists in the digital platform. But I think I'm happy to be part of the group as well because there's plenty we can do in the conventional offset side as well to make for better book production.
And you spent a lot of your career trying to get folks to operate in a more standard way.
Yes and no. I mean, I still want to make a beautiful custom-made book, but I want to do it in a way that is cost-effective for the customer and somewhat profitable for the printer as well, and that's increasingly a challenge.
Okay. Alan, we heard a little bit about Canon just at the start, but talk about your role.
Sure. My name's Alan Filson with Canon Solutions America. I'm the director of what's called professional services. And what we do is we help connect the content to the printer. We help that transition of the question that the young lady back there asked in the last session and the lady asked yesterday. We have all this stuff. How do we get it in a known good condition and get it to the press in the most expedient manner, most cost-effective manner? And that's kind of what we do for Canon.
So standards are a solution potentially to problems, but what are some of the production challenges that you face in the creation and distribution of books? I mean, what are the things that you see as everyday problems?
Well, we talk about the book market like it's one entity, but the reality is there's the retail market, there's STM markets, there's specific categories of books, and the challenges from each category aren't necessarily the same, right? So if you're in the STM market, you don't have one author that's the author of the book. You have multiple authors because each article was written by someone and each PDF is created by someone, and they all have to come together and actually make the book. And each one of those PDFs may or may not match the X1A standard that we talked about in the last session. So how do we get all those together? How do we get that book made? How do we get the blanks inserted so we always have chapter openers on a facing page and all those things when all these things have to come together? That's some of the challenges that exist. You move into a POD model, for example. I mean, when you're printing offset, I don't want to say it's the wild, wild west, but you have a tremendous amount of paper choices to use. And when you go digital, sometimes it gets limited. Maybe it's because of production cost, or maybe it's just because typical papers work better with a specific technology. But that's another limiting factor, another something you have to consider. And I know we talked about in the last session as well about designing, knowing that might be the case.
Rich, how about for you?
It's an interesting time in any manufacturing process in the United States. For lack of a better term, we've trained ourselves on the Amazonification, if I can create a word, right? that something should be available that I can purchase now and have it on my doorstep in 2 days. And for all of us in the room here, that's a very difficult thing to achieve from a cost point of view, from a quality point of view. And I don't want to create a book for my we do kids books, we do coffee table books, we do things that have purpose and value and stickiness. Not that your book wouldn't fall into that same category, but I don't necessarily want to be able to give it to my customer in 24 hours. And so as we talk about the graying of the production and manufacturing workforce, and some of the experience that leaves, we have to talk to the next generation of manufacturers and print buyers to let them know that it isn't Amazon. I'm not going to get your product available to you instantly, in general. Right. So I think that education is probably still the biggest challenge we face.
So we put up a set of things that we talked about in our prep call. Things like multiple sources, multiple ways that you struggle with, and also a lot of manual intervention. Less so on the on-demand side, but still an issue to try and educate the consumer. What is it that you see that maybe going back to Rich? I think you had some examples of printing instructions that are both good and maybe not so good.
So I'm going to rat somebody out, but we're all friends here. So I think if you go to the next slide, we can talk about the fact that I felt the presentation Damon just gave was great because it talked about the need to standardize in the world of prepress. Something as simple as job instructions and purchase orders can make all the difference in the world too. Yep. And any way we go. And so you're going to talk about the standardization that can occur in the digital world. In the offset and conventional world, we're still dealing with everybody using a homegrown system. So here's an example of a purchase order that we got, and while the dollar amount is scratched out, I can tell you it was a pretty nice order. This doesn't tell anybody anything. Really bad. I mean, just look at it, and ultimately it was enough of a legal document that we could bill the customer. But the amount of human intervention that went in behind the scenes for us to successfully deliver what the customer wanted is phenomenal.
So beyond quantity, you don't really know a lot here.
I don't know anything, and so I've hopefully done enough to let you know who it isn't. Let's go to the next one, and I'm happy to show what a really great purchase order is, and I thank our friends at Sourcebooks in suburban Chicago.
A loyal BISG member.
Great company recently had some involvement with the PRH family, and you're all taking a picture of this. There are 2 slides. Wait for the second page. It's even better. But it's the detail here that makes for success, is the long and short of it. And so everything you can imagine, down to the ISBN number, and you're going to see on the next page, actually go to the next page, I love this, that a lot of the shipping requirements reference, I noticed this, I hadn't realized it before, but it says label cartons according to R.R. Donnelly barcode labeling guidelines previously submitted. Look, LSC, this, you know, in this case, LSC is the largest book manufacturer in the United States. If they want to establish a good barcode standard, then we should all accept it and move on. And so if I can do something to make the output of my customer's product better, I'm happy to be involved in that. So the point here is not to diss the first people and overly praise the folks at Sourcebooks here. But I think the point is clear. This is a complex process. Whether it's old-fashioned complex or new complex, it's complex. And we really need to, as an industry, try to limit the amount of options that come into that process for success.
Yep. I think one of the things I wanted to also kind of draw out in this conversation, as you look at a good order in the source books as an example, how does that come about? I mean, is it driven by somebody who's really good?
It's great communications. The reality is, and I'm sorry, these are all the bad jokes I use as I attempt to encourage young people to come into to this. But you know, our manufacturing side is custom manufacturing, and even if we're repeating a rerun of some kind, a reprint, the reality is that the paper may have to be different because the original paper is unavailable, or you may have, there was a reference, we needed to get more Kobe Bryant books out in the last couple weeks because of the tragedy. We're now have the opportunity to step up and help, but we're going to have to make compromises. So it really does come down to good communication and good training. I'm sorry, good training of my people. Right, what we have to invest in an educated customer service rep, you just can't take a really smart person off the street who's a college graduate and teach them how to manufacture books overnight.
And we'll talk about it a little bit later,
Yeah.
but that's also a challenge because some of the talent that you've historically depended on, whether on a publisher or within a printer, has either retired or is not being trained the same way.
Correct.
So, let's talk a little bit about opportunities, because I think there's some upside and things that we could either be capitalizing on or developing standards for.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at that PO that we just had on the screen, you think about, we talked to yesterday and today about KDP, right? Amazon's engine. We talked maybe Barnes & Noble, Nook Press, some very similar. They have, in some ways, forced people to answer the 20 questions, right? Trim size, paper I'm going to print it on, where you're going to ship it, how you're going to ship it, and all those things. And the reality is every printer needs the answers to those 20 questions. And on that PO you just saw, it had the answers to those 20 questions on that PO. So if we can, as an industry, know what those 20 questions are, we all kind of, printers know what those questions are, and publishers know what the information is they need to send. If we can come up with a standard that says, here's how we're going to deliver that, you know, whether it's we follow the Amazon model or we build our own, I think it would be really, really good for the industry, because not only would you be able to send your files to, IPG, but you could also send the same exact XML file, for example, or JDF or whatever it ends up being, to Bookmasters or to TPS, and add a printer very, very easily, because everybody's looking at the same thing. I don't have to have an IT person translating the XML from this publisher and the XML from this publisher to get it to a standard. We have a standard that we can all use. And I think if we can develop that, Canon, HP, Screen, the publishers, the printers, I think that would be a really good thing for the industry.
Okay. And Rich, you invest a lot of time in managing orders, essentially making sure you have a complete understanding of what the client requires.
Right. And I can't stress enough that, and I'm not going to whine about the economic challenges of the traditional printers. I think we're all aware of that. But I still need well-trained people. And as an industry, we've skipped an entire generation. We absolutely have the people, pick the age, 50 and above, who are maturing out. And some of us are doing a really good job of trying to bring in the 20-somethings. Yeah. But there should be a bench there in the mid-40s of people who have experience, and they're not there because the industry didn't invest in them. And we're starting to feel that pain. So that's why I'm as supportive as possible in any kind of standardization, because it is just, we can't afford all the humans and we can't find all the humans, right? Kara's laughing. It is the challenge of your manufacturers. We can't find them and we can't afford them. So if I do find them, I have to pay them a living wage, and that's going to translate into a higher manufacturing cost. But if you want your product done, that's a reality you're going to have to get your head around.
And I think you saw something similar on the publishing side of things as well. I mean, that the people that you're working with are, in general, it's not a question of age, but not necessarily they don't have the experience that you might have had a generation ago.
You're not graduating from graphic arts programs. There are great graphic arts programs. There are 4 or 5 of them left, and they're doing a really good job training for your world as well. Yeah. Probably better for your world, because for those of us who are parents of that generation, they're digital natives. It's easier for them to understand. But we've started a training program for our select customers to send their employees to Wisconsin to spend 3 days in the plant, because we have a great video. We spent a lot of money on a video this summer. It really showcases the plant well. But as much as anything, it's twofold. It's to show younger print production people how the book is manufactured, and to hopefully be appealing to potential employees to see that what we manufacture is kind of a cool product as well. But it's my role. So here's my role in marketing at Worzalla is from a social media point of view is not to acquire customers. It's to acquire employees.
It's interesting. We did for the last 2 years a book industry study group, a program called Concept to Consumer. It was essentially the entire supply chain for book publishing, and we did it first the last 2 years in Chicago. We're bringing it to Minneapolis in September, and the 2 sessions that were most compelling, one was manufacturing, because most people had never seen it, and the other was distribution. Again, people had not seen it. We were fortunate to have folks from both IPG and ReaderLink come and talk about parts of the market that folks have never seen. So making it visible, I think, is a really important thing. Is that list of 20 or so core components a way to train folks, or is it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, everybody answers those questions differently. Some people answer them in a PO, right? They put all that information in a PO. Somebody reads it. Somebody keys it into the system. Some customers, they will deliver that in an XML file. Here's all the information. Here's the answers to those 20 questions in XML. And large publishers maybe have that data repository, so the XML tells me which file I have to go get. So, we go out as a printer and you get that file, you pull it back, and you do a content to intent verification that, it was supposed to be 120 pages. Well, it is. It was supposed to only have 4 color pages. Well, it only has 4 color pages, and all those things match. You can automate that process and let that book go through. But of course, there might be things that need to be corrected, right? It's not always cut and dry. Like not every print-ready file is really print-ready. So there's systems that you can put in place to help with things like bleed, and help things that normally would be a manual process to fix or correct. You can automate some of that. And in some cases, a customer can give you that XML file as an order, but they don't have that repository, right? They don't have that large repository of files. They still have to FTP it somehow, some way. Or even the worst case scenario is they can't give you the XML order, and they don't have the repository. So those files have to come, and somebody manually has to go to an FTP site and pull them, and manually has to enter the data into the order. All that stuff really just adds cost to the total production of the book. So the more you can automate the order, the more you can automate the pre-press and the streamlining of the information, the less expensive it becomes to publish the book and produce the book.
I agree completely, and I'll also add on the back end. right? You know, EDI standards for distribution, we've been talking about them for the 35 years that I've been in this industry, and we need to get smart about it because, again, we expect our product to be, you know, I ordered those shoes, and I'm going to get them tomorrow, and they're going to be exactly what they want, and they're going to be on my porch in Chicago. So if the next generation of buyers has that expectations, we have to help them limit the amount of choice to get there in all elements. So the standardization is really critical. And I think we're going to have to stop being snooty about it. You know, if you create a set of standards, you, the digital world,
Right.
and they take hold, then damn it, the conventional printers are going to have to get around it too. We just have to.
So there have been efforts over the last 25 to 35 years to develop standards. Prism exists in the magazine space. XBit's generally not widely adopted in the book space. You know, is this a situation that can be changed, and what's been standing in the way? I mean, maybe start with Rich, because I think you have a perspective on it.
What's been standing in the way? Tradition. I just think that it's some of the samples, again, Damon had up about, what did he say? Standards are what we establish so we know what to ignore. It was a great line, but it's very true. We have to figure out how to not ignore it. And I think that there's been this belief that if I'm XYZ publisher or I'm XYZ printer and I created something in 1993 that was really great, I'm not going to evolve from it because all of my back-end systems tie into that.
Yeah.
Again, that's why I'm open to change. I think it's fear of change. But look, there are less printers in the world. Publishers continue to consolidate. This might be the opportunity to actually establish, to work together on both sides and establish some common standards across all those processes.
Now, it's worked pretty well, or better than average for things like PDFX, so that, you know, the people have adopted pretty much the standard for file formats. I mean, there are exceptions. You just talked about things like bleed and the like, where people don't quite fully implement it. But why is it working for PDFX and not for printing instructions or production specifications?
Well, I would say you don't want that phone call, right? You submit your order, you give the printer a file. The last thing you want is that phone call saying I'm missing, I have a bleed problem, or all the text is RGB, or every page has color on it, or all the things that we deal with as printers. You don't want that phone call. So I think the PDFX has been adopted as a way to avoid getting that phone call. That's going to delay your order. It's going to delay your production. On the XML side, I don't think it's been quite as painful, or on the order side, I don't think it's been quite as painful. And I also think there's a cost involved, right? Sometimes you have to get your IT people involved to help create that file that's going to be coming out, or adopt that standard, or make sure that we have all 20 questions answered. So it could be cost at the end of the day.
I can't answer it. I mean, it's just, it makes total, why did PDF, I would argue, because R.R. Donnelly got behind it. I mean, I was an employee of the company at the time when they announced it in 2001, and it was obnoxious. We just said, we're not taking any other files. And they had the wherewithal to create change in the industry. We probably need to have that same kind of intervention, which is tougher to do. But look, the reality is that I can take a PDF X1A file, and so can you, and we're going to give the customer consistency based on that.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing. We need to incorporate that in more elements in the total book production.
You may do different things with it, but,
Of course.
but you
Right.
have the same starting point.
And that's something, you know, and one could argue that it's Adobe. I mean, you know, if we could get, if Canon would come and create the perfect production right now, Alan.
Happy to do it.
Okay.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about how in a minute, but I wanted to talk about, you started to give a couple of examples of what happens with shorter run lengths or book of one, and how you can have a highly automated to a less automated process. I think the thing you were trying to draw out is whatever the hierarchy, the more you require the downstream intervention, the more expensive and the slower it's going to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If you're A customer where everything's automated, your ordering's automated, the printer can go get your file in an automated fashion and pull that. Obviously, it's less expensive for them to produce the book, for your book to be produced. If you have two people touching it, well, not only do you have two potential points where you can have an error introduced, right? Because somebody's touching something and entering some data. That makes it also more expensive because now I got labor involved. Or if I have multiple people, I have a pre-press person that has to open a file and look at it and run it through something and then evaluate the results of that. It just adds additional cost to the cost per page or the cost of the printing the book. So the more you can automate the process, and like I said, we're Canon, we're here to help you do that. The cheaper it becomes for the printer, and the cheaper ultimately becomes for the publisher to produce the products.
And I think that BMI sponsored an event or themed its fall meeting last year to talk about automation 4.0. You know, it's I think it was a challenge on the part of the organization for its membership, but it's something that not just the Canons of the world are thinking about, but any production house is going to have to be thinking about to be able to compete in the future.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say also with, you know, if you think about we talked a little bit about it earlier today, but you think about that title that you keep 1,000 in stock because you know that's kind of what I'm going to sell, and all of a sudden, oh my God, Oprah talks about it, right? So now you're going to need 10,000, and how do I transition? You know, it's going to take me 3 or 4 weeks to get the warehouse with enough books to meet all the orders. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just click a box in my MIS system and automatically route those incoming orders to all of my POD printers, and I had a standard way of doing that in the meantime until that warehouse gets full with the books that you need to get produced and get them out the door. Okay. That's you know, standards can really help us in that area.
You were going to say?
I think the BMI meeting proved that the manufacturers are not putting their heads in the sand and trying to fight anything.
Yeah.
I'll speak for Worzalla, but our fellow members of BMI, I believe we're pretty progressive in understanding that our product is still vital and we have to be cost-effective manufacturers. Mike had a great comment, discussion about that. In order for that to happen, we have to get comfortable with not just saying, well, this is the fill-in-the-blank printer way. And so your point about the different levels of customers is really true, is just as true for us too. Absolutely. I mean, there are going to be special one-off beautiful books that are going to wait for the perfect paper. And the most embellishment and treatment, sorry, Matt, glitter that you can find. But the reality is that a lot of times compromise is okay. And if the compromise, A, gets your product, or B, leads to some of that standardization that helps us manage. I mean, is paper up next in the agenda? The reality is that I would respectfully disagree with Don's comment about, I think, in fact, it's harder to figure out where paper's coming from. And so being able to, for some products, standardize and live with alternatives is really important. And not every publisher is there yet.
And as you said earlier, this is all happening at a time when the level of production expertise that used to be available is lower. So understanding some of the complexities is difficult. I mean, you talked about limited choice within paper, but the reality is that the kind of paper that you pick and the processes that you use to manage that paper are significantly different.
Absolutely.
Offset to on demand.
Yeah. And just real quickly in paper, for the offset world, we're doing a good job, I believe, in that we're standardizing house stocks to meet the greatest needs. We're obviously still love to produce that product that has a special paper that is unique and creates a thing of beauty that will be treasured. But we're having both of those conversations because the supply chain channels are different. So we're thinking about that in a way that we might not have a long time ago. And the mills are owned by guys who like making money, not who like making paper. And that's a fundamental shift over the last 5-6 years, right?
Whereas printers are owned by people who don't like making money.
It feels that way. We're trying to do a better job of that.
Yeah.
But as a result, our ability to go out and secure paper is we have less choice than we did, even 2-3 years ago. And so that has to figure into all of the standards that we develop.
And really, the digital world kind of forces that. So when your run is 10,000 or 15,000 or 20,000, you're not going to be changing paper every 5 minutes, right? You're going to be able to wait until that runs over, and then you change paper for the next book or product that you're going to print. But when you're only printing one, and on this one I need this paper, on the next one I need a different paper, and the next one I need a different paper. I can't change paper every 30 seconds, right, to print those books of one. So digital's kind of forcing people to come to less choices, right? Because it's just because of the manufacturing process alone would kill you if you had 30 or 40 or 50 different stocks that unless you had 30 or 40 different presses that had those stocks loaded on them, which may not be the right choice either, but it kind of forces you into fewer choices.
And trim size as well, although there are some finishing options that will give you variable quality, I think is better supported if you can be consistent. So one last question before you go to the audience. Who leads the way here? This event actually was partly put together with a consortium of folks that included a number of associations. Obviously, it's BMI, but we were part of it. IBPA contributed. I think you heard discussion about ECPA as well. Is it at that level, or because most organizations, including mine, can't mandate. I can't tell you this is the way you must do it. How do we move forward?
For me, I think it needs to be a consortium, really. It needs, and maybe BMI is maybe this forum is the right way to get the conversation started, because it needs to be the publisher needs to be involved in here's what information I need back in my ASN or my order acknowledgement. This is the information I need back. And the printer, here's the information I need to be able to have all those 20 questions answered. And us as a manufacturer, well, here's the information we need to make sure that our press runs the files the way you want them to run. I really think it needs to be a consortium, and I think a group like BMI or yourself can help lead the way in putting that standard together.
Okay.
I agree completely, and I would add, because we're all going to have to compromise, right? And I believe, that the education, more transparency of the challenges we're facing. I understand the challenges of the publisher needing to get product ASAP into the marketplace. They need to understand that for variety, I have a cost structure that is high. I have high fixed costs. So we don't think if I ask you if we all agree to do X, we need to understand that there's a real business reason behind X. And I don't know that we've approached the problem that way in the past.
Yeah, articulating that I think can be something that's done in a group's fashion. I mean, we pull together committees every month in 5 different areas just to talk about issues like supply chain and metadata and rights. And it's always an education because people start with an absolute understanding of their own area. We developed the taxonomy for rights, and we started with the notion that everybody loved the idea of a taxonomy as long as it was theirs. So kind of brokering a compromise on that is important. We have time for questions from the audience.
Yep. Anybody? Yes, Pete.
More of a comment, maybe, but also a question. I'd like to pose one more challenge to the adopting of standards, and that is, in the past, 8-10 years, printers have been starving for work and willing to do whatever it takes a lot of times to keep that work and gain more work. And a lot of publishers just want to keep things the way they do. They don't make changes, and they like the way the printer's been serving them. I run into this a lot, where if I start pushing some standardization back to them, they're like, well, you know what? We'll just go to X printer over here because they'll just take it the way we give it to them, and they'll just do it. If you're going to want us to go jump to these hoops, forget it. We'll go to somebody else. It's enabling, we have printers enabling bad behavior out there, so I don't know how we combat that.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I have a thought. You're absolutely right. And full stop. You are absolutely right. Next question. No, I think here's how it's going to be addressed. For those of us, I think we have fundamentally, I'm just talking on the conventional side now, on traditional offset. We fundamentally reached a point where for decades there was more supply than there was demand. And that has changed and probably will not go back. So now we have the chance with the industry, not that it's good that I have the leverage that I haven't had for 35 years. No, it's great that I have the leverage I haven't had. But the reality is that hopefully the printers will get smart and not kill each other to win a job and create the Wild Wild West, which is what happened, and it's I think, your example. And so you're right. The smart publisher and the smart printer will realize that the standard is good for both of them. And right?
Right, absolutely.
And the other side of it is you're just going to have to, because there's going to be less choice for supply. That's my hope.
I think before we go to the second question, I might also offer, the marketplace is shifting. So if you think about what's going on with Barnes & Noble right now, with the new CEO, who's looking to take their retail model from many copies of a relatively small number of books to far fewer copies of a larger inventory of books. That's going to change the ordering processes. It's going to require more two-way communication. That's not going to be managed in the more traditional ways. So I think that the retail market pulling may also give us an opportunity to create a smaller scale conversation that maybe creates standardization where it supports those kinds of ordering and distribution models. Thanks for waiting.
Yeah. So I think that there's more small presses that want to use offset and have the options to go through the life cycle, but they don't have big departments, they don't have automated processes, and we use a lot of freelancers. And so each of our printing partners gives us a profile for creating our PDFs that's specified to them, and each one of them is very different.
Right.
And so one of the things that would help a lot of the publishers do a better job of partnering with our printers is if we had one profile that you all agreed to, where we could go through that life cycle a little more easily.
Okay. We actually were talking a little bit about how PDFX is not, or and JDF in the same way. Achievable or?
Not yet.
Yeah.
Right? It's just not. And I feel your pain, because, by the way, your pain is the same in my pre-press manager's pain.
Right.
Because he's a really great guy, and all he wants to do is get the files through as accurately and as efficiently as possible. And when you send him a file that was worked for printer X and it doesn't work for us, we're both unhappy. So that's the $64,000 question. I don't know how we solve that.
Yeah, and some of that's system-based too, right? And that's the other challenge. You know, the printer A wants a trim box, that's the right size, but printer B, he's off the crop box, that's the right size, right? So depending on what system they have is what they're looking for, which is why that standard's a little bit different. Could be that automated. So getting those things together, and X1A doesn't necessarily mandate that the trim box needs to be there, right? It says the trim box can be there, but it doesn't have to be there. So if your printer relies on that to do their processes like the LSC talked about earlier, that's why that standard's a little bit different for them.
Okay.
That's a bad answer. Not your answer. You just summarized the entire challenge in one question.
Absolutely.
We got to figure that out,
Yeah.
because we're okay.
We'll hear from Damon. So here's a pre-press answer. The differences you see in those different printers' profiles, with a little bit of a deeper dive, you'll find that they're mostly cosmetic, non-consequential. For instance, your example of do they key off a trim box or a crop box, so long as they are both there and accurately defined, any printer can use it.
You can adapt to it.
And in embracing the PDF X1A format, I have looked at standards of a number of different printers, and they are far more alike than they are different, I guarantee you.
So you're volunteering for the working group?
Anybody else?
We'll be collecting badges at the end of the conference.
Yeah.
I have one other question for the panel, if there's not from the audience. What's one takeaway you'd love people to kind of have in mind? Maybe it's either it's the feasibility or just what could somebody do next going forward?
Well, for me, I would say don't be afraid of going into the POD market or going into the book a one market. There's ways to get that legacy data that you have and you're not really sure if it's right to a known good condition so that the digital printer can print it reliably. So don't look at the elephant in the room. You know, we'll do it a little bit at a time maybe, but there are ways to get all of that information to the standard it needs to be.
And I would add to that the reality is that we still are, in many ways, custom manufacturing, and the resources at all the printers across the spectrum are so good that don't be afraid to ask and say, what am I'm thinking about sending you X, what could I do differently or better for both of us? Because that's some of the ways that organically we'll start to get some standardization. And I'm a relatively new person in the book manufacturing world, long time in print, and it was fascinating to me that after 30 years in one segment, I joined the book group, and it was the identical situation. They literally had the same challenges, and it was the same commitment to doing the right thing for the customer. And so know that there's really great people that can help you, and you should ask for help.
And I'd offer that, depending on whose numbers you believe, we produce in the U.S. between 400,000 and 1 million new books, new titles a year, and we have something north of 40 million books in print. So finding a more standard way to deliver on those while not affecting the outcome and the variability of the product is probably critical for our success long term.
And all those titles were produced perfectly without any errors.
By Worzalla.
No, all the printers, every manufacturer.
All right, thanks today.